Hi everyone, this is the SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting of 8th November 2017, and today we're going to talk about kubeadm implementation in 1.9, especially regarding AJ, self-hosting, and upgrades, and related topics. And first out we have Jamie, and something about the etcd operator. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so I'm currently in the process of trying to use the etcd operator for HA kubeadm, but I ran into a problem last week because I realized that the current etcd operator relies on a working DNS server, and the way it advertises new members of the etcd cluster is through host names. And so that's a problem for kubeadm because we don't have a working DNS server by the time etcd is working, right? So we need to. The best solution is to change the way the operator adds new members by using the node IPs instead. So to basically use IPs to advertise IPs instead of host names. I chatted with a few CoreOS folks. I think Hong Chao was on the line too, so feel free to pitch in when you want. But yeah, so that is the solution. But in order to make that work in the operator, we kind of need to change the way that TLS is handled. Because right now, the way that TLS certificates are generated is against, like the SANs are based on host names, right? So if we're going to generate certificates based on pod IPs, we need to sort of shuffle the logic there to make it work. And so Hong Chao and I have been sort of discussing on Slack the best way in which we can do that. I think there's two ways we can do it. Number one is using like the CSR model. So so currently how the kubelet does it, it sends a CSR request to the API server. The API server generates either serving or client certs based on the root CA. And either a user approves it or you have like an auto approval policy in place. So that's solution one. Then the second solution is to generate an etcd CA, so a CA root for etcd cluster itself, expose that to the operator, and then the operator can use that CA to basically generate new certs every time a pod comes up. So we would do that in an init container. So the init container would basically sort of look up the CA cert and the CA key. It would retrieve the pod IP, which is the host IP because it's on the host network. And then once it has that host IP, it would then generate the certificates with that SAN in place, and then it can then join the cluster via TLS, right? Personally, I'm a fan of number two because I think it's a lot simpler. In order to get CSRs to work with auto approval, you need like a custom controller with like custom logic in place to basically say, oh hey, this is the type of request we think it is, auto approve it. So yeah, that's my personal preference. But yeah, so that's the current state of it. So Hong Chao, did I miss anything out there? Do you have any personal opinions of what you think is a better solution to do in terms of the operator?
So I think that the two solutions is what I can think of as well, and they are all good to me. I have no opinion, and yeah, I'm currently like more prefer to like whatever Jamie thinks the best, and that sounds great, and we can definitely implement that as long as we are well coordinated.
Right. Okay. So does anybody else have like an opinion on which one might be better? I know Lucas, you might have an opinion as well.
So first, the certificate generation thing, right?
Sorry, is that a question?
So yeah. So you mean the certificate generation, which option to use?
Right.
I would definitely prefer if we, from the get-go, made a difference between etcd, the etcd CA, and the API server / cluster serving CA, because well, there are two different security boundaries, indeed. It makes it harder, even harder, and even more certs. I mean, we already have way too much of them. But in the end, that's probably the right way to go. And yeah, I think correctness is more important there. In the end, we're the ones that are supposed to abstract away this complexity, right? And over time, we might find something that achieves the same thing with less certs or like whatever. I don't know, Spiffy might come in and help us. Who knows? But yeah, that's the first thing. I do think they should be separate. And as the current controller, CSR approver and signer doesn't support multiple CAs, we don't even have an option then, kind of. So then the question is, should we, for example, if we store the etcd CA key and cert inside of a secret, we may be able to Chao, is there any certificate generation process or or something like that in the operator, or is it, I mean, is there something that could create a secret in the cluster, for example, when it creates a pod, then it also creates a secret? That is,
it doesn't need to create a secret. Like you as long as like you give a root CA cert and the CA key, sign-in cert and sign-in key, like it can pass along with the etcd pod and then like use an init container to generate the cert based on the host IP or pod IP, like just like whatever the advertised URL is advertising. So it doesn't need to create any secret. It's all self-contained.
Yeah. So I was thinking, like, if we could, if there's somehow we could make every etcd, so not that every etcd peer has access to the CA key. Is there any way we could make every peer just see its own already generated credential instead of having every peer like have the roots thing?
Oh, I see what you mean. But the signing cert and the signing key is provided like by like some admin, which is etcd user, and the etcd user like provided he also own the etcd. Like why you couldn't trust the, like in our model the user provider signing cert also owns the etcd, and the etcd can see the signing cert. That's like it's all contained inside it by the user. It's all owned by the user, right?
And also, like the signing process needs to happen within the pod itself, because at that point it's the only point at which you know the pod IP, right? And that's why you use like an init container to find the pod IP, grab the CA and sign, and then generate the certs. You like if you did want to flip that on its head, you'd have to, I don't know, like try and get the operator up front to find out the potential pod IP, generate the certs, and inject them. But I'm not sure how good that would be.
Isn't, like, since it's running on the host network, it's definitely going to be the IP of the kubelet, right? Or in the node object.
What about putting a service in front of bots?
We can't really hear you, Fabrizio. At least very slowly for my part.
Yeah, I mean, that, I guess that might also be an option as well. Like, so like, Jal, correct me if I'm wrong, but the operator basically, when it creates a new pod, it basically sort of listens for new nodes, and at the point which it detects a new node, it creates a new pod for that node, right? So my point is that at that point where it adds the new pod, it's going to know the new node IP. Is that right?
Yeah, it's gonna use the download API to get the host IP.
Right. So if it knows the node IP, it therefore knows what SAM to use in the certificates. So could we have the operator create the certs and not an init container in the pod?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's totally feasible. But again, like it all depends on use cases, and that's really implementation details. We can like
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just sort of saying, because like Lucas, if you have concerns about it giving pods access to the root CA key, we would be able to get around that by having the operator generate the certs instead. And then like the pod just grabs whatever's been generated by the operator, right? So you're sort of, reducing the attack vector there if we don't trust the etcd users who, whatever. But
yeah, I'm just thinking like when looking at this design and things, the attack vector is kind of large anyway, right? So when using secrets for these things, so just so we try to keep it as minimal as possible, so it's somehow reasonable.
Lucas,
yeah.
Even if you use a secret, it can still like see it, like. So, and actually, that's a reason, like if you use a secret, it's gonna mount into the volume, and yeah, it's gonna still see the cert.
Yeah, but I was thinking like it doesn't have to see the CA, the root CA key, right? It could only see its own credential, and we could possibly be like make it easier to revoke an individual etcd peer's cert if we kill the pod and kill the secret, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think like this discussion would benefit from like a design doc or something like that. So I know that we mentioned in Slack that would be the next stage. So I think like just sort of writing down all of this and then figuring out like the best implementation would be a good next step. The question I had is that like code freezes on when? The 22nd, which is in like 2 weeks. So if we need to change something in the operator, my question is like, is it feasible within 2 weeks if we're going to have to write a design doc, settle on an implementation, and then actually implement it? Can this be done in 2 weeks?
It's gonna be tight for sure. And then I mean, people have KubeCon coming up really soon as well, and preparing things for that. Yeah. Is there, so in the meantime, is there anything we could, so I just asked you whether we are blocked on something in implementing the etcd operator as is with limitations, or yeah.
Well, yeah. So basically, So I mean, the way that the operator adds new members and how they advertise themselves is with host names, and so that's not going to work for all of the duration at which the DNS server is not up. So yeah, in my opinion, like there was no way in which we could deploy it. Like I'm trying to think of a possible hack. I mean, you could try and like add an entry to the hosts etcd hosts file to try and temporarily allow that cluster host name to operate. But yeah, that sounds like super janky to me. Like I don't think that's a good idea. I'd much prefer just to sort of see whether we can refactor the operator to use IPs rather than host names. Yeah.
Yeah, this this cycle is really short. I mean, for everyone, barely any weeks at all. But yeah, we'll just try. Regarding the exact. So yeah, I don't think we can come around really the advertise like the fact that it uses host names now and not IPs. I don't think we would feel comfortable shipping, like claiming to do something and using a Etsy host hack, right? Anyway, so
for a conclusion here, I think just the next step would be just have to decide that first and just like make clear the QAdmin use cases, how it's gonna use it, and then like we will just decide the API and in SID operator and implement it. Sounds good.
Yep, that sounds good. And I mean, this is generic functionality anyway. For this, for instance, like advertise IPs or host names is a general thing, and improving the security with pre-provisioning cert as opposed to giving the root's CA key away everywhere is also a general thing. So yeah, I think a design like there sounds good. Changing the operator, using the next release, and then we'll just see how far we come this cycle. Cool. I should write that down in a minute. Tim, conclusion on the etcd server and client discussion from last week.
I'm still waiting on feedback from Jiang. I don't know if Hong Chao knows anything about the 3.2.10 release.
Yes, we are also like waiting on some like in SID operator. We also like have some issues on 3.2 and like most of them needs to be fixed on gRPC. So
Yep,
and gRPC and
that's the latest.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
That was the last word that Jiang said, was that they're tracing down gRPC issues, but I don't know where it stands other than that.
Oh, I see. Like currently it's like there's some gRPC. I can like so what kind of things you want for the details? I can like help ask here, like and maybe give you a list.
Well, we just want to know what the time frame is. What we know is that there are a series of bugs that existed in 3.1, some of which were related to the client and some were on the server side. And what we're trying to do for this release, if we're going to include the operator as part of this, I think the thing we need to track and keep in our minds is getting the update of the client inside of Kubernetes to 3.2.10 once 3.2.10 is available, as well as tracking the server to be 3.2.10 inside of the operator deployment that we will eventually use.
I see. I would say 1.9. It's like just like currently there's no estimate. Like we have been like keeping in sync like every week. I've been asking them about the 3.2.10 as well. Just like based on last week, there's no estimation for now. I wouldn't recommend like updated like just for the short time, but like it will for the long term it's definitely gonna be fixed and like everyone's just like getting blocked on this. Maybe give it a couple more weeks, like a month or something, would be a good estimate for this.
That's pretty dangerous though. There's that deadlock constraint that exists from the client side that it's really bad for HA clusters, right? So I know that we want to give people time to fix it properly, but we need to get a fix out in the field, because there's that one blog post of that guy that's publicly available now, outlining the issue that exists, and what they bumped into.
Yeah. Actually, like we encountered this like very early, like just like 2 or 3 months ago in BookQ tests. Like we are making a lot of tests in BookQ, like doing self-hosted SSD. But unfortunately, like the BookQ owner just like doesn't care about tests, and just like doesn't want us to touch that anymore, unfortunately. But that's definitely something. It's actually it's hidden for a long time, I would say. It's like no one actually wants HASD, and even people runs, no one wants to know the root cause of that. And now we are like, it's a long time issue, and it's gonna like being pushed in a short amount of time. And I don't know the good answer for this.
Well, I think the answer for us is we will stay alpha until such time as we have the full test suite beating the hell out of it at scale.
Yes, I would say like more testing and better tested this, like it's a good forward looking. And so even we provide a fix, we still need to like test it and make sure it actually fixes the problem before like declare that's like safe and stable, right? For HASD.
Hong Chao and Timothy, thanks for your update on the etcd issue. Do you have is there one place where those issues with the latest client and server are written down, maybe summarized? I know you mentioned a blog post.
There's several issues that are traced back. Some of the issues are actually already fixed in 3.2 series. Those were ones that Jordan had uncovered. So that's the server side issues. The client side issue is manifested in a different one, and I could link in the chat once I find it.
Please, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and please in the meeting notes as well. So just to recap what we said, both so etcd 3.1x has known issues that are even worse than 3.2x, but 3.2x still has known issues, at least in the client. Then what we want to do is wait for 3.2.10 to come out, to be released, bump the client inside of the API server in time for 1.9 to go out, and preferably use a 3.2.10 etcd server as well, if we can get that validated by a large-scale tests. Is that right?
That's the ideal rainbows and unicorns world, yes. I don't know if we will achieve that within the time frame according to the feedback from Jiyoung and Hong Chao. So I think for the time being, we are safe enough in that we are still alpha, and I'm cool with that. And this also actually gives us time to properly bump from a kubeadm perspective, because right now kubeadm went from 3.0.17 to 3.1.10. And this would allow us to properly bump per release cycle. And I think we're still okay from our side. I think other people are going to be in some bad shape.
Yeah, I'm actually not that worried about us. I mean, in the end, we don't have the largest scale deployments we know.
I mean, I personally like can represent like CoreOS to apologize for all those things. Like, I don't know. I want to push the testing and like for HA, but like, it's just like not going well enough. And there's some like CoreOS doesn't have some like spend a lot of time and just like focus on making the SSD like stable for Kubernetes use cases. Like we haven't done the job well, and just sorry for like delaying all those releases. but we will definitely aware of this, and I'm keep pushing back like Brandon and the management layer to like give SED more resources. And
if we want to publicly admonish, I can hold Brandon's feet to the fire. If that helps.
yeah, like actually recently we have a good engineer like who's like lead engineer in SD, but he recently left, so that makes the short head count as well. But yeah, I definitely we will push this and make it stable for like Kubernetes use cases.
Cool. Then we have got that written down. Let me see. So then, I don't know, did you have time to cover the bootkube and kubeadm differences talk yesterday in SIG meeting?
No, I don't think so. I had a quick look at it today, but it seems like the purpose of the doc is to scope out the differences and possibly see, you know, the feasibility of converging the two tools. Is that right?
Yeah. So eventually, bootkube will be kind of graduated into, or like replaced by kubeadm, as far as I know, as it grows the same set of functionality. That is my take on it, I think. But before that, we basically need to identify the differences and things that might have to be fixed on the kubeadm side. A quick, so the obvious differences are daemon sets vs deployments. Bootkube uses Flannel unconditionally. kubeadm doesn't, and this is a like source of the etcd operator issue we're seeing, right? We don't deploy any networking solution, then we don't have the DNS pods up and running, hence we can't use the host names inside of a cluster to resolve the PS. And the same goes, yeah.
That should be fixed by the by that new scheduling functionality added in one. Well, it was added in 1.8, it didn't work, and now it works in 1.9. So, in terms of not being able to schedule pods to network not ready nodes, and so yeah, like a lot of the reasons why we chose daemon sets in the first place, like we may not have that problem anymore. So hopefully that's not too much of an important issue anymore. And so if Bootkube do like insist on, you know, wanting deployments as a resource type, we probably don't have that much resistance to that, I wouldn't have thought, from a kubeadm point of view.
Personally, I do think that daemon sets are better for predictability and things like that. We don't have to scale up and down the things. But yeah, sure. I mean, at least the technical blocker is fixed in 1.9, thanks to your work. And yeah, but still, like the DNS thing is that DNS is unavailable in kubeadm is still a thing, and we just have to use IPs instead. What else? Checkpointing.
Yeah, the other big one was the render thing as well. So Bootkube renders manifests before it acts on them, which kubeadm doesn't do. So I think Ryan wanted that as like a feature of kubeadm, being able to render, like run a render command and then spit out all of the manifests, and then users can tweak them and then they can deploy them basically. But I'm not sure how feasible that is, because like, you know, if we did render all the manifests and then the user runs kubectl create on like a directory, that doesn't really guarantee that the control panel will come up in a proper way, right? Because it's more than just like a random execution of manifests. So yeah, I commented on that specific bit. So if you want to have a look at that too, that would be great.
With regards to checkpointing, I talked with Yuju last week, Thursday. She had some comments about the current implementation, some minor things. I need to reshuffle order and fix a couple of things, as well as get a node end-to-end test in place, which is a little thorny because the way the node end-to-end tests work is they have a pre-configured initialization routine, and I don't really want to enable that behavior for all things, but I could. So I'm going to have to get those two pieces in place. My goal is to get that done this week, so that way I'll have plenty of time before code freeze and just get it in. And then we're going to need cycles to enable and test and fix any issues that we find. But it's not a lot of code. It's just a matter of initialization routine. The hardest part is just the kubelets. How the kubelet processes inbound things is very difficult to follow. So, but that's the only update I have.
Okay.
Everything
thanks.
on the kubelet side takes a while. It's like, I don't know, glacial.
Yeah. We had, yeah. So one thing I'm wondering is, when we do have the etcd operator and we have deployed everything, we have like say 3 masters, and one of the masters go down. Then when the third master comes up back again, it will see the checkpointing directory. It will see that, well, I was running an etcd instance. I was running an API server, controller manager, and scheduler. It will restart these 3 pods. Is that just gonna work, or do we have any corner case with like IP tables checkpointing?
In the high available mode, you don't care, because you're going to automatically rectify with the main API server, right? Because you have a DNS name for the main API server, or the what's it called?
The VIP.
The VIP. Yeah, it's going to reload the entire API tables rules. It'll do a full list. It only is a problem if you had a single node configuration, and then you would have to checkpoint the IP tables rules. But that's kind of bananas to deploy that way. Our default deployment that we've already specified for a single node is to have a static pod configuration, right, for the etcd, in which case, again, it will reload from the IP tables rules from the API server. So I think we're fine there.
So I'm wondering like what that's going to look like with the operator. So Hongqiao, imagine that one of the etcd pods on a master goes down and we checkpoint it, and then the checkpointer brings it back up. Will the operator also try and redeploy the pod, or does it not bother?
So like currently, like we are planning to add currently usually our deployment works like this. We have like 3 master nodes, and we label them, and the etcd operator will figure out, oh, there's no more master nodes, and won't add like when we deploy new pods and wait the crash pods to restore or something. But in the future, like the best solution would be for self-hosted, it's not pod based, it's actually a node based. So it's actually going to reconcile like how many master nodes is there, like how many nodes is there, and then like
you can just add toleration seconds.
Right. Yeah, that's something we did as well. But that's like even you add toleration, the issue is like currently it's still like pod based. You want to actually make it like very node based. So as long as the node is not like deleted, it's like it's partitioned or unready, you can like tolerate it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think just setting some like, again, this is the configuration that we're talking about here is not the soup to nuts bulletproof HA configuration. So I think it's the good enough to get you happy started environment, and I think updating the toleration seconds to some reasonably high value, kind of similar to what we did with the certs, not that high, not 10 years in certs, but something high is a reasonable thing to do, right?
Yeah, cool. And yeah, everything gets easier if we use the host network for etcd pods, right? So the initial implementation I was thinking of used like a service, right? An internal service that actually required kubeproxy to come up, and then we had turtles all the way down. But with this method, we can still use like API server to etcd communication over localhost or whatever. I don't know. Maybe just the local IP of that master anyway. So yeah, I think that should work. Any other topics, things, action items to next week?
Do we have, at some point we'll have to rectify at least just in queue time to doing docs. This is a pretty big docs blowout, right?
Like docs for AJ or docs generally?
Well, we're kind of enabling self-hosting as the default, as well as, or version X of self-hosting, because there's a couple different versions, and then as well as adding HA as a feature-gated thing, right? And I think not even publicly stating that it's feature-gated, or maybe we should. I don't know. I don't know what our policy should be.
We should, because otherwise users will see the feature gate, think it's all fine, run it, and boom.
Okay. Yeah, then we should publicly state that, like, this is alpha grade with warning, and get the old school construction GIF up there, and
yeah, that makes sense. And testing. I mean, I still haven't written the thing I was planning to. Basically, a long doc on every, outlining our pretty huge test matrix. We need to have. We have pretty good coverage, but it's far from ideal. So as we add more features like self-hosting, like AJ, like IPv6, and whatever, we need to expand the testing in an exponential manner.
One thing I was contemplating, and I know you created like a container for this too, is our initialization. We've had a lot of thorny, weird issues with regards to deployment of debs and RPMs. And at some point, we could just have like our own deployment container that host mounts and does the right thing, because it's basically shuffling around system to unit files, system control restart, and our RPMs and debs are kind of crap anyways. So we could just scriptify most of this and do it properly and work across N distros. I don't know what folks think about that.
I just can comment that it was incredibly hard to find the time to maintain. So I eventually just deprecated the thing, and like, well, yeah. So what I really want to do in 1.9, if possible, is to start using start reading from a file for the kubelet, right? So that kubeadm actually can set the parameters to the kubelets in a well-known location, so they can, this way they can talk, right? Right now, it's, if you upgrade in a wrong manner, but kind of obvious, you'll get into a state where you have 1.8 flags, but you're still on a 1.7 kubelet, right? Or even worse. As this is because of the debs, where the kubeadm package has the kubelet drop-in, right? So if we upgrade the kubeadm deb, we're going to get a new, but not the kubelet deb. We're going to get a new argument for the kubelet, but we still have an old kubelet, right? So and this is kind of, oh, it's terrible. And what we can do here is start using dynamic kubelet configuration, which soon should be a thing, I hope, but also start loading from a file. That's we're pretty sure that that's going to be beta in 1.9 at least. Just the feature that the kubelet can read from a well-known file really tags there. That way we could make this better. Tim, on packages, do we have any, do we see any 3-week plan for making that situation better, or is it more long-term?
It's long-term because of the whole split between Bazel and the release repo. And I don't want to put any effort at all into the release repo and its process because it's insane. So I'd rather just get out what we can get out and then move on to 1.10. And hopefully in the 1.10 cycle, we'll have the auto builds with Bazel in place.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. So what we could do in time for next week is hopefully having the checkpointing PR ready to merge, having SIG nodes approval. A recent change that merged was kubeproxy component config. A PR that refactors the whole kube scheduler's internal structure was merged also today-ish, and that unblocks kube scheduler component config. So hopefully in 1.9 we'll be able to embed both kubeproxy and the scheduler's component config struct inside of the kubeadm master configuration API. That will make it possible to to have validation and defaulting inside of the for the different components automatically, right? Right now we have an kind of untyped string map with arguments, which are command line flags, and that's kind of bad with no structure. So component config here is preferable. The only thing that worries me though is what about customization? Let's say we have API servers and we use component config for them, and we have an address field, for example. That's not going to be the same for all the API servers. Or do we have any plan there?
I totally missed your question because somebody else asked me another question. Slack, sorry.
So with regard, so I just said that component config for kubeproxy and kubescheduler is kind of ready. They're all fine. Their own API group, soon going to be graduated to beta, hopefully. The same goes for the kubelet API or kubelet component configuration API. And that's way better than the string slices, maps. With command line arguments that we have now with no validation or whatever. So this will make it possible to directly inject the structs with validation at all and everything into the master configuration API.
Yeah,
but
I think eventually, like I don't think it's going to be all. I think we'll be bleeding the edge on that, right? So.
Yeah, and I think we should be bleeding the edge there because we're still. I mean, our kubeadm config API is not going to be stable anyway until we have component configuration kind of GA, or at least beta for every component, right?
That's going to take a while, but yeah, I agree.
I mean, I don't see. Well, I would really like to be able to go to beta with the kubeadm configuration group, but at the same time, it would be it wouldn't be great to do that with string maps, right? With command line arguments. So rather than rushing that, we need to push on component configuration across the board. So that was a quick update on those. Actually, we have pretty good progress the latest weeks on this area. So yeah, we can be optimistic about it. If we don't have any other topics, we could get back 9 minutes of our day.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Until next week then. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.